So if you wish to hide your face from the world, please just cut your video so that you will not be visible. However, I do encourage you to keep your sound on mute so that we don't have any background noises that interfere with the presentation and any of the film footage that we might be showing you today. However, I also encourage you to use the chat function to communicate with us. Please post your questions throughout the event. And then at the end, towards the end of the event, we will pose those questions and comments to our panelists. Or if you have anything you wish to communicate with us, please use the chat function to do so. These live events, these education events and public events that we host would not be possible without the generous donation and support of our public and our funders. So my colleague, Danny, is going to post a link on the chat that will make it possible for you to continue to support our events at your convenience by just clicking a link. So just look out for that link on the chat that will be posted by my colleague, Jordan. So I'll wait just one more minute before we officially begin. A few more people have joined us already, but we are expecting a few more. So we have Maya Zapata, and she's joining us from Greece. I'll try and pronounce the name. It's Astipalia from Greece. Oh no, it's not a name of the place. Is that a greeting or a name?
No, you're right. It's Astipalea. Hi guys, I was shy, but now I'm just gonna say hi. So, hello from Greece.
There she is.
Hello.
Yes, we were just discussing you, Maya. So it's actually nice to see you for real. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for sharing our work. It's very important to me. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
I'm going to shut up now.
Okay, so it is now 4 minutes past 7 p.m. in South African time. So I'm going to officially begin and introduce and officially begin the event. So tonight's event will focus on the extraordinary theater work of dramatist and theater director Miriam Ibrahim, titled The Sounds of Rain. This extraordinary and haunting theater production is an artistic confrontation with the genocide against the Herero and the Nama people of Namibia in 1904, and how its traumatic repercussions still haunt the present. Tonight's event is a conversation with Miriam Ibrahim about this work, also about the genocide against the Herero and the Nama people, and collective and transgenerational trauma that develops through racist violence. In her work, Miriam also explores how the painful experiences of our ancestors resonate within our bodies and in our behavior. And just to introduce Miriam, before I hand over to start the conversation officially, Miriam Ibrahim founded her company, The Shades of Grey, as a platform to write, direct, and produce her own plays and performances. Currently, she is working as a dramatist and director at the Oberhausen Theatre. From 2020, she will be working at the Zurich Theatre, one of the leading theaters in the world. And moderating this conversation tonight will be Indra Wusso, who's the founder and director of the SILT Foundation and a very good friend of the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center. Of course, the SILT Foundation initiates and supports innovative contemporary literary, visual art, and performance projects with the aim of encouraging cultural dialogue and artistic interaction. It has residency programs and that offer those international multidisciplinary artists, performers, and writers the opportunity to live and work in Silt, in the island of Silt, and also in Johannesburg and other places where the foundation works together with its partners. So Indra is the founder and the director of the Silt Foundation and currently lives in Johannesburg in South Africa. And so now at this time, it is my pleasure to introduce, to present and hand over to Indra to begin our conversation with our esteemed guest, Miriam Ibrahim.
Oh, thanks so much, Mdu. It's a pleasure to be back. I mean, it's our third event we have so far. We had a Chilean writer with Polish roots. We had a Burmese writer who couldn't be here himself because of the military coup. And this one, the third one, will be one of my favorites, I know, because I so much enjoy Miriam's work. And I'm very happy that Maya is here too. We learned to pronounce your name. Yeah, it's really on the top of conversation that we have right now about how we deal with diversity, how we deal with who we are. And there is an incredible amount of, we always say diversity in our society in South Africa. And I find it really, really interesting to look into how in other countries you try to understand that we actually all belong together. And to belonging together also means to understand how traumatic it is to live together and to live with a complete unjust and difficult history. And my first question to Miriam before we talk about her theater play is, because we met in Johannesburg before you traveled to Namibia, how did you come up from your own experience and your family and ended up in Namibia?
I planned to go to Namibia because of this play. So that the reason was that when I had this idea, let me start somewhere else. Let me go all the way back. I lived in New York City for a while, 4 years altogether, and my work visa was not extended. So I had to leave back to Germany within 3 months and leave everything behind. I like the company and all the connections. And I was but I was devastated. And a good friend of mine, mentor and friend, John Gold-Rubin, we were sitting in the bar, and I told him I really don't want to go back, but a lot of New Yorkers would love to go to Berlin and go to Europe. And he questions me why I don't want to go back, and I explained him that because of racism I don't want to go back, and because I feel more welcomed as a Black woman in New York City than I felt back home where I was born, and that also within my work as a theater artist, as an actress, I was at the time, and as an artist director, as a Black female director, I felt no place for me. And he then actually supported me and empowered me, because he asked me, what kind of theater would you like to do? And what kind of theater would you like to see? And what are you missing? And then we had this intense conversation of what kind of stories I'm missing. So I'm missing Black European perspectives. I miss not white perspectives and stories on stage. I'm missing diversity stories on stage. And so he basically said, there you go, how wonderful it is that you can be an activist and an artist at the same time. And I still was scared at the time, but then I said, I think I would like to see just a conversation between somebody like me, like we call it, like Afro-Deutsch or Black German, talking with her white grandmother. And we love both this idea of having a conversation with two generations and confronting an older, like the young generation confronts the older generation. And let's put it that way, the Black German young perspective confronts the white older generation on the topic of racism. So, and because I didn't want them to escape, I love the idea that they love each other and that they are family. So they cannot, you know, they are kind of intertwined. They cannot put themselves, like you said in the beginning, say we're not connected. They are connected if they want or not, so they cannot escape that. And that was 2013. And then 2016, I wrote down a whole concept, especially for this piece, Klang des Regens, which is the sound of rain. But I incorporated in the concept my anger and my responsibility as a German to look into the German past of colonialization, because I myself encountered, while I came back and studied anthropology, I didn't know so much about the genocide the Germans did in Namibia. So when I faced that 2013, 2014, I was first I was shocked, and then I couldn't believe that nobody knew about this, and that especially people who fought in the genocide, German people who were also in the camps there and came back to Germany and also worked in the NS regime during the genocide in Germany against the Jews. And so there was a strong connection of responsibility and cruelty. So a lot of emotions and anger that in our society in Germany, people don't know this. That was one major thing, but also that I noticed that white German people don't know about the colonial history at all, like much. And so they don't understand how racism really functions and where it started and how it is still like so toxic today, and that we can not only look at today and what we can do today, but we have to look back on history in order to deconstruct and decolonize our ideologies, our language. You know, we still have street names here. We still have street names in Namibia on people who did horrible things during the colonial times. So when I wrote that and I made that decision to intertwine not my own biography only, but to combine the history, I decided I have to also go to Namibia and be there. And because I'm not Namibian, I am German Ethiopian. And so I've been to East Africa a lot and to Ethiopia, and I felt a responsibility to at least go to Namibia and be there. And that's how I came to South Africa.
But I mean, it's very interesting. You talked about the idea that how you develop your theater pieces, like a kind of a progress. You start reading, start really from different fields, collect material, and then find an entry point. And this is why I'm so interested in, because we had talked about racism, the naming of the streets, because what I found very interesting that the Nazis actually in 1933 named a street in Munich von Trotterstraße. Actually, and it was only in 2006, if I'm correct, that they changed the street name finally into Herero Street. So but still they didn't accept that there was a genocide at that time. So when you started in 2013 and until now, there's a lot of interest in Namibian politics and reconciliation and accepting that there was a genocide happened at the same time. So how would you see how the political situation, what the work you do, the work making people aware of white privilege, of racism, how much do you feel did it change over the years until you finally came out with this piece?
I have to be honest, yeah. I know the process seems like a huge process of the acknowledgement of the genocide, which I understand, which actually happened when we had our last final rehearsal. It's supposed to be the premiere actually, but we had to postpone because of the pandemic. But that day, Germany announced that they, how do you say, not accept, but
they acknowledged that it was a genocide.
Yeah, thank you.
Willing to pay reparations.
Yeah, but there's no but. That's a good step, but there are so many steps we're still behind. So I'm still impatient with many things, and from 2013 till now, I feel that since also Trump and the movement of Black Lives Matters, I do believe there's an increase of racism and a brutality all over the world, but also in Germany. So in one hand, there's a process of talking about things, making things visible, actually saying the word racismus and racism in Germany was, I think, maybe 10 years ago, 7 years ago, it was still, you couldn't do that. People didn't want to use that word in the news or in a conversation. And if I used it, I was the aggressor because I used that word. So in one hand, I think the process that Germany acknowledged it is a good step, but also we see and we can look at the different perspective that what they offered is not enough, and they're still negotiating and having conversation on how how do you say that word? What do you do as a government when you say, yes, we committed genocide? And what are the steps you do? And can you, if you talk about money, how do you talk about money? But is it only money? And for me, there are so many politically, this is not my expertise politically, but in everyday life and in theater, there's so much more to do. So in German theaters, there's still a white supremacy talk, like about who's on stage, who's behind the stage, from who's writing the stories, who's directing the stories. So there's so much more we have to do to have a equal, diverse community or country. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you also you work. I mean, you were an actress before. You are an actress as well, and of course, I mean, we actually talked about how trauma actually sits in the body. And when you talk about your experiences and not only now that there is still this injustice, but growing up in a society that actually pretended that there were no people of color or what a real German is, and didn't understand the marginalization and disempowerment. I mean, it must have been, it had an enormous impact for you as a Black woman.
Yeah, I definitely, there is no doubt. But not only, I think for all people of color, and especially for Black women or Black people in Germany, the burden of racism is very strong. And depending how you deal with these situations, with those trauma, with healing those situations. And I can talk about me. I think until I understood what actually happened to me and already the damage that caused, I already was an adult. So when I was an adult, I think it started in the beginning of when I like 20. It started earlier, but the feeling, it was merely emotions, and I had no words to describe what I felt. And because I mostly felt singled out and alone, I wasn't sure if I'm paranoid or if I'm what white people always said to me, I'm too sensitive, or I have a wrong perspective. So I needed actually other people to acknowledge my truth and my reality, to actually acknowledge it myself. But already damage had been done, like, I mean, insecurity, not liking your hair, not liking maybe the way you look. So I was socialized in this white country that I then had to de-socialize and free myself, which is still an ongoing process. So when I found a community and some people who I felt understood me and had similar experience, then I started growing very fast of getting vocabulary, getting the right books, which were there already, but internet, I mean, I'm not a millennium. I had my first computer when I was 22. So, and then I was on Facebook 2008. And I think actually 2009, it started that I, through Facebook, met other Black artists and Black actors in Germany, like Black Germans. And then suddenly it was very fast through the social media that I understood of white supremacy, and I understood of empowerment. So yeah, since then I'm constantly learning and empowering other people. But Indra, I have to say, I think it really bruised me a lot. I'm not sure who, and I get emotional when I say this. I don't know what person I would have become if there was not so much racism in my life. Yeah, and it's similar to sexism, I have to say, that sexism in my life also made me think about what's beautiful and what's not beautiful, and how you have to be as a woman. And so I'm still learning to ask the question of who am I? Yeah.
I mean, there's this you also talked with me about this important book, My Grandmother's Hands, of Wishma Menakem, about how we, And I recently saw an interview with him on the wisdom of trauma, and it was very interesting that, you know, a lot of white people become immediately aggressive when they listen to him. And it's a point of, I was really stunned when he said, look, there is this enormous amount of asthma among Afro-American women. Why does it come? Because they were suffocated, because nobody listened to them. And it's inscribed in their bodies. And I think it also gave me an idea of the work you actually need to do. You need to do our work. You are the one that have to go out and say, look, this is my pain, and I want that you recognize this finally. And people get even aggressive, a lot of them, with this. And I wonder where your strength comes from with all the pain which is inside you.
I don't think I have a lot of strength. I am very weak, and I think I acknowledge my sadness. I'm sad. I'm crying. I'm crying in conversations if it's happening, and I show my pain more, but it's still very, I feel very vulnerable, not comfortable. But since a few years, I recognize that it actually changes people. I'm not using it as a tool. I'm trying to be authentic, because I learned the last years that with me being sincere and authentic, I'm reaching a real dialogue and empathy, and that empathy makes then the other across me listen and let that truth enter this body, like you and I now. I can speak to you, and maybe when you ask me about the pain, which I can then show you, and you can let it in. You said so many things about trauma in the body, and this is a gift, this book, for me. And Maya is here as well, and Ute, who was playing also in the piece. Maya Alban Zapata was being in the play, and Ute Fiedler. And when we started, we had first conversation, and I said, and there's the mind and words and rationality, and this is all wonderful, and we can collect truth and knowledge there too, but then there's the body and the emotions, and we might not have words for that yet, and it's not rational, but I do believe that there's a huge knowledge and an intelligence. So I do believe that there's a body emotional intelligence which you can read about. It's not something new I'm talking about, but in German, where I grew up, the rational self was the most important, but I noticed that it's not true. And when I went through depression, I realized I hurt myself because I did not let my body and my emotions speak. So when we talk about racism, when you experience racism, you can feel it in your body. So if you can imagine an insult, you can imagine any insult somebody does to you. Is it just by a word? How do you feel? What does your body do? Can you breathe normally? Are you getting hot? Do you get tense somewhere? Do you want to hit back, or do you hold back? And what does it do? Can you scream? Can you not scream? If you scream, what do you do to your throat? And if this incident happened, if it's really intense, how do you feel tomorrow? And you can then see that it is going through your body, that your body is hurt. Sometimes you even have a muscle ache after a situation. We all know that we cried maybe 1 hour nonstop, all of us. And how do you feel after? And the next day, maybe you feel relieved because you let it all out. but still the body it shows inside the body. So when we can try this all. So now think about someone you really love. You really love, and maybe you miss this person. Maybe this person is not even alive or far away. And now feel it in your body. Where does it sit? And you can feel that it's inside of your body. You can also do this. I don't want to do this now because it can be very hurtful, but you can do this with bad feelings too. And you can see immediately that your body is reacting. So we have to look also through our bodies. And also another thing, I know I'm talking a lot, but what we discovered when we rehearsed, especially for me when I watched wonderful Maya and wonderful Ute, in exploring through the body different kind of emotions. And those emotions were emotions we discovered in research on genocide, on watching and reading about the genocide in Namibia. So it was not random where we digged in, and then we tried to just let the emotions out, how we felt. Very, it's not objective, it has to go through us. But we discovered that in all that, there is shame, there is guilt, there is horror, there is pain, there's anger. I mean, we wrote it then finally down in German words. So now I have issues to translate all those words, but those words were not words first. They were first emotions with no words. And then they tried to embody it with the bodies or with the voices. And it's unbelievable when you hear just a sound of pain. And also we discovered in the journey that there's love. And the only, actually, I mean, it's a bit cheesy, but the only thing that is like hope is love. And that there's a different kind of embodiment of love. It's not always love as a word, it's love oder Liebe, but when you use it within your body towards other bodies or other things, it's almost unlimited.
Wow, so well said, Miriam. Maybe before we look into the play and show some images, or maybe a part of that, because we talked about the body and how the body perceives memory, oppression, pain, and trauma. When you came to Namibia, how did you sense what was there? Because of course these are all invisible things, but they are still there, you know, and the body is there to feel it. I mean, what did it make with you?
My body and my emotions in Namibia did a roller coasters. I've been to a lot, Ethiopia and Djibouti and Eritrea. So I've been to East Africa, but I have not been to Namibia. So it was my first time. And I love the light of the sun. I love the grass. I love the smell of the sun dusty air. And I arrived, and the first days in Windhoek, I was, surprised and shocked how much German architecture there was, and how the architecture is embedded in the city, and still, like, the soldiers from that time have monuments, and I didn't feel the justification. I didn't understand the architecture of the city and how the colonized architecture is still so in your face. And I know we have to deal with history, and it's history, and I'm not talking about maybe taking it all of the houses from 1901, 1904, 1907 down, but how do we work this history? What kind of responsibility do we have? I mean, I'm talking about now Namibia, but this is a dialogue I would have with Namibians and question different Namibians, but also I would ask white Namibians or about what do they know about their past, actually, because I'm not sure if they really go into that dark space. So we have to talk about this in Germany as well. There's a goal happening, I think, almost.
This is I can quickly interrupt because, you know, there is this a Danish historian, Caspar Eriksson. He actually wrote a very important book called The Kaiser's Genocide, and actually about, and he did a lot of research in Namibia about that book. And he said that it was very weird for him to see that Namibian Germans were completely ignoring what happened, and they were actually also not interested in really giving interviews or looking into their own history. And he felt, okay, main Germany was a bit better, but then on the other hand, I say that book has never been translated into German. And this is, for example, where I say, okay, then in Germany, obviously, there's also no interest in that history. And, you know, then I see you then in Namibia in that space that's actually hostile towards their own history, and another, and an understanding about shame, guilt, and you share part of this history, but on the other hand, you don't share it. So, and to look into one's own involvement is probably, it's the wrong word, but connection to this, as we talked at the beginning already about connection, it always has a connection somehow to us. And in which direction it goes, we often don't know.
Yeah, my perspective is a different one than yours. I mean, I think as a Black German, or let's say as a Black person who lives in Germany and who also, I mean, I would define, like, I would say I'm Ethiopian German, so I'm also saying I'm German. My responsibility is to look back on history, and it's for me, and then because of that, Germany does not understand racism. It does not understand really the function of structural racism or historical racism. What they understand maybe is some words, but they don't understand the structure and how it actually works. And so why is it so necessary to go back to also Namibia, not only, is because it's a racist history of Germany. And so they have to go, and they still have bones and collection in their museums. So, and it's not that people don't know, some people don't know, but people know, and they have a different take on it, that they still collect, they still have those bones and artifacts that were stolen and murdered, and they have it in the museum. And so for me, it is a combination of being a Black German that I have to fight. I have to be an activist. And as a German, I feel the guilt and I feel the shame. like totally. I can vomit when I think about this. But what I learned through my work is that I have to go through this pain, that I have to go through this guilt and shame in order to transform my body, myself, and also to not pass it on like collective trauma. When if I don't understand my shame and my guilt, which my mother, we talk about this, that there was a silent treatment about the Holocaust and about what the family did. So we don't know what actually our ancestors did. And she didn't ask and she didn't question because she was raised like that you don't question. But so she doesn't know. But she knows. I mean, I can see now by the way we behave sometimes that you use your pain in order to hurt other people because you cannot deal with your pain, with your guilt, with your shame. So this is what I wanted to also show you in one scene of the piece, where I think for me, it was very visible that the collective trauma that the white grandmother experienced, and when she felt it, it was so unbearable that she had so much discomfort and anger that she didn't know where to put it. And if you don't know how to deal with that and where to put it, you put it onto other people or maybe destroy things. So
yeah. Should we see this scene then now?
Sure. I'm not sure because I didn't introduce like really much on this play, but dear audience, just write if something is unclear or if you have questions in the chat, so we get you on the boat. So
as you are aware, I have for a long time now been divided under the law and in the law, following it as heaven form in obedience. Also in hope and in the faith that God our Father would in the fullness of time deliver us from the wretchedness of this world. So far, I have borne the burden peacefully and meekly. Whatever wrenched my heart, I have let pass, trusting in the Lord. I shall not write at length, merely this. My arms and shoulders have grown weary, and I perceive and believe that the time is now at hand when God the Father shall deliver the world by his grace. When you read this letter, know that you shall appear as you must appear. I trust you understand this message well. I tell you that I have given up my position. That is the main point. I have come to an end. I shall also write to the major to tell him what I have done. I have also written to all the other chiefs that the time has come.
So the scene, when the scene started, Maya was reading on the video a letter from this book. And it's Hendrik Witboy's papers, and you have different letters from Hendrik Witboy, and she's reading one of his last letters where he says, "I'm coming to my end. I'm asking you for the last help." And what we then see is how is the Black woman and the person who has Black ancestors reacting, and how is her white grandmother reacting, and what Ute Fiedler does is actually that it's unbearable for her, or the feeling that when she actually thinks about guilt or the genocide, or that there's shame, but there's also, was heißt Ekel nochmal auf Englisch? Disgust, I think it's disgust.
Oh God.
So you have all these emotions of really disgust, guilt, shame.
Yeah.
And what do you do that? So when you all think about just shame, and when you then put it in your body, you can see what the body does and how it reacts. And so she is portraying this kind of body that then is incapable of having a normal conversation. So she goes back to the conversation where the anger and the emotions goes through her. And we know this maybe from some people, that she's basically accusing her granddaughter to make the floor dirty. It's not like, you know, but if you feel guilty or ashamed, and then you have a conflict right at the same time or right after, then you can react and take this guilt and this shame and this anger onto that person. So if we're not aware of how trauma and how these emotions are affecting our body, we easily can hurt other people. And what we also discovered, also here, Maya, Nina is the role, has a total different reaction. It's very strong and very empowering, and then it breaks and she's melting and she has no power. She's almost like paralyzed. So when we have two bodies, one is paralyzed and one is aggressive through full of guilt and shame, those bodies are actually not meeting each other. Or if they meet, there is a collusion. There can be damage. So if we don't understand how our emotions change our behavior, so white people who might not know about racism, and we talk about racism, mostly the first thing they feel is guilt or shame, and then mostly they turn it towards the person who talks with them. Like, so we have to stop this way of reacting, for example. So this is what we discovered, or I, by watching now what do I do with that? I mean, I try to understand my emotions better, my anger, and I try to go through and ask, where does it come from? Yeah.
I mean, interestingly, what you discover individually and what you bring into the art is, of course, not only an individual, but also a social, you know, what you so well described as a collision that leads to aggression and further violence is something that happens socially as well. And do you think that the arts, that what you do is something that can show ways how we can heal together?
I think that it might show, but everybody has to go through it themselves. So it might show it, like makes it visible how it can feel, and what it might does, like dysfunction relationships or incapability of talking together to understand each other. We can show this, but to actually heal together, everybody has to do it. So it's not enough to just, you don't get catharsis by just coming to this piece, or you're by maybe a painting or pictures, or by attending this talk. I do believe that is a process and a practice that continues, and it's painful. I do believe there's no way around when we talk about racism, or let's also say structural change. If we change habits, and doing racism is a human habit which is horrible, then it's a change and it will be uncomfortable. And then do it again and change it again and keep changing. That's uncomfortable. But also facing what racism does is painful. And if we are not ready to face it because we are scared to feel pain, then I don't think we can go through. So I do believe that we have to empower each other to work with pain and work with fear and work through the tears. Yeah. And I do think art can empower that and can inspire that, or motivate that.
Oh, thank you so much, Miriam. It is such a profound conversation and point you raised. I wonder if we should maybe include first the two actresses that actually are here, how they felt about it and working on the play, and maybe also anyone from the audience who wants to share something. That would be lovely to open up the conversation. What do you think, Mdu? You are the host today.
Yes, absolutely. I think it would be lovely to hear from the two actresses, the process that they went through to embody these characters, and perhaps, how do you express pain? It would be lovely to hear from Maya. And if I know Maya definitely is here. I don't know if Uta is here. Okay, but then maybe Maya can maybe just relate to us how the process was to be involved in this
I
production.
don't see her anymore in this list. Maybe because she's in Greece, maybe it.
All right, but I think maybe she'll come back. But there's a very interesting comment in the chat, and that is from Esther. And she's talking about the term objection. So objection, the state of being separate, of feeling like you are not part of your surroundings. You are an other. And you spoke a little bit about that as well. But the question that came to mind was about young people, perhaps teenagers. I don't know if you do any work with young people. How does this feeling of being an other, or maybe the transgenerational trauma that you spoke about from being othered, How does that manifest itself in young people? How do they express that?
One question I have also is that what Esther wrote, just the word objection as a comment, or is it objection to Corinna's text? That's what I was questioning myself when I saw it. That would be also interesting, but to your Esther, there you are.
It was actually just because you were looking for this word, ekel.
Ah, yeah.
And that was like the first association I had to the word ekel. But I found it so interesting that you were then taking on this notion of Kristeva, what's her first name again? Julia Kristeva, in this way that objection separates us from. And I really like that, thinking it further. So it was just in that. Okay.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So I think we work with ekel like more like disgust, because the feeling of ekel then is disgust similar. I think for me, when we can all try it, if we are really disgusted. Sorry, but that's how we rehearsed to embody different kind of feelings. Sometimes, but the feelings were before, like we had no words. We watched a video on the topic, and then we just went into the space and let it all out. And objection is fantastic because it actually happens when two emotions are so different towards each other that they cannot come together. That's yeah. And that was very vivid to me in rehearsal, that our history and the emotions of the history can make us separate. And we have to take down, we have to understand those emotions that separates us. Like when you feel so scared, one body is scared and the other body is full of shame, they're not coming like this. If you try this out, how the body moves and works. So anger actually is a very good emotion because it just tries to to meet other bodies. So there is always a chance actually of interaction. So and back to the question of the youth. I have been working with youth, but that's been a while, and I did some body workshops with people, but it was not only focused on youth, but it was focused on Black and POC people in Germany. So we had a safe space, and I can share what it does to those people and to those bodies. So first, there's a lot of insecurity of being themselves in white spaces or in everyday life. So the whole body is more like it's mostly not free and up, and all the energy can go out. Often it's more down, so protected. And clothing, mostly they don't wear what they really would love to wear. They wear more things to hide themselves or to not make them so visible. About hair, especially for women, they having issues with their own hair, of liking their hair, straightening them, because then it fits more into the surrounding beauty standards. Body shapes of bigger thighs, bigger hips, all that is full of shame because it doesn't fit into the stereotype of German beauty standards. showing anger. Most Black women don't want to do that because they don't want to be that Black angry woman. But then they keep it in, meaning they have pain. They have physical pain because they keep emotions, sadness, and anger in. Some are angry all the time, and then they have headaches, and they have burnouts, and they don't know what to do. They don't know how to calm down. They have fights. They hurt other people. They hurt themselves. Men, my brothers and cousins, are putting stronger masculinity on, to be stronger, to be not vulnerable. They get profiled all the time, and I think I don't know, I don't know how to say it, but show like Zartheit, like being soft to each other, being gentle to each other, would be very helpful, especially for Black men in Germany, and giving them props and hugging them, and giving that like they can be soft, they can cry, they don't have to be strong all the time, but also we have to protect them somehow through, because they really burn a lot of angry and energy, like I would say people, it seems like people scared of them because they're Black. So what does being scared do? Again, think about how your body reacts when you're scared. Either you get aggressive or you flee. And imagine that happens to you as the other all the time. So for me as a woman, as a Black woman, I get exoticized, fetishized, and I also have a hard shell, and I try to be very masculine to have a stronger boundary, but I use this coding to protect myself. So that's why I go back to who am I actually, because I all the time have to change my codes of body in order to feel secure. Talking with a lot of emotions and with big bodies, laughing out loud is very uncommon in German white spaces. And the othering makes you lonely. And so with lone, then we all can question ourselves, how do we go through these spaces then, or do we look for other spaces? That means for kids, they might not do what they really want to do. So, maybe they want to do ballet, or maybe they want to do, for example, something very typical white in Germany, classical music. Well, so you might not go there because you're not welcome. When I started as an actress, I felt I wasn't belonging there, because the only parts I was offered was parts of prostitutes, slaves, refugees. I did not get any roles of the princess or the doctor, lawyer, none of that. So then, but what they said is there's positive racism, what they call it, that I should go to the musical because I can for sure sing and dance. And so then I got more offers in musicals. But then I have to be like, so either I go that part, and I even thought, and maybe I should become like then an entertainer, but I did not want to. I wanted to do what's it called, Sprechtheater. I wanted to do drama, and young people don't have those words. Young people don't have not yet written all those, not read all those books where they can find words. Maybe they don't have the community. And I experience this a lot with, now I'm 40, so when I meet 19-year-old or 20-year-old, and always the shock of the moment when they understand that they are othered. And that time usually takes it takes years to understand that when you thought you're part of this community, but then you noticed you were othered. Yeah.
Mm. Wow. Miriam, for the audiences that have seen the play, what has been the reaction of those audiences that have seen the play?
I did not speak to so many, but what I can say already is that there is a difference between white audience and Black and POC audience. None of the Black and POC audience said to me ever, I did not understand. But some of the white people say, I did not understand it really. And for me, this is again, I don't want to let it in. I'm watching it, and it has to be maybe more obvious like you have to be maybe more vivid, but I didn't want to do that because then I hurt other people. So this was a reaction. And then my mother, she's white, she was very quiet. And she but said, now I have to go back and think myself and put myself in the shoes of, question her ancestors. You know what I mean? Like this piece is talking about going back and question your ancestors on history, but also on racism. Black Germans said thank you for showing this ambivalency. I'm not sure if this is a word, but ambivalency of loving and being angry at the same time, and being related and to white people, but are incapable of speaking to each other or understanding. Thank you for telling these stories, because we need those stories. We need those perspectives. Thank you for the music. Yeah.
Wow, that's powerful. Indra, is there anything you'd like to ask and add?
No, I think maybe if somebody from the audience would like to say something.
So while people maybe are thinking of writing questions, is there another clip or any visuals that you'd like to show us, Miriam?
I can show. So these are some pictures. Can you see them?
Yes.
Okay, this is Maya, and we used a very simple setup of stage, which is basically the empty space. And we have, was heißt denn jetzt weltlich nochmal? So these things here, I forgot the English word.
I forgot everything. Whenever I'm asked, do you know the word? I'm blank. How do you call the roofs in South Africa that we have?
Okay, So then I have to look, because you can go with me too.
No, you see, it's corrugated metal. Yeah, I'm.
Okay, I know that there's a different word for it too in English. Well, in Ethiopia and a lot of African countries I travel to, there are a lot of houses and roofs built with this material. And in Namibia, there's a huge gap between the middle class or rich people who live in stone houses, but then there are lots of houses made of this metal material and shacks. And so I wanted to bring Namibia to German stage. So we chose this material, which for me is a childhood material, because every time it rains, you have a different sound of rain because the roof is out of this metal. And then we had sand, a bit of sand, and chairs. That's basically it. And then we used video on the background, and the two performers, Ute and Maya, had actually the same costumes, the same cut, but just different, a bit of a different color. And yeah, and Maya had underneath a body with a kente print, because as the Afro-German, so often we try to empower ourselves with African prints. There you see Maya expressing anger that breaks her in the back, and her grandmother is feeling it but cannot react to it. Yes, this is Maya on sand talking to her dead grandmother, trying to feel her ancestors. And here we have another expression of an expression of yearning, but also fear and protection and wanting to get out. Maya could express it even better, what she kind of had for emotions, but you as an audience can just put your own projection on this image. Let me try to make some music while we hear this, while we see this. Here you also see this different kind of bodies, and not really, they are connected, but also not connected. Incapability of actually coming together. And there you see very different, that they're very connected and they come together by the story and the way they actually connected, even though they don't look at each other. Yeah. And here we have a conversation between Maya and Ute, but in the background, life is a different feeling. The pictures are not so strong, but on the picture they are very in the focus. So this is with boy and this is with boy's family, but this is actually my grandfather. So we mix those ancestors here. And there is anger destroying. I mean, it can also destroy your body, which we discovered too. If you don't be careful when you expose anger, you can hurt yourself. Rage, anger, frustration. If you embody them, you can hurt things, break things, and hurt yourself. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you.
There's
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Du.
Thank you. Yeah, just people were saying that, yeah, it's called corrugated iron or corrugated metal. So that's the English term for it. If there's nothing else, I think Indra, maybe closing remarks, and then maybe Miriam also closing remarks, and then we can say good night and good morning to people wherever they are.
I think there is a question.
Yes, I think Esther has a question. Yes, Esther.
Okay, Miriam, thank you very much. Vielen Dank. Das muss gerade auf Deutsch sein. I have a question, just because I was notified about this, about your talk like yesterday in Facebook, and like I was just like, the word that really caught my attention was the word genocide, and of course the genocide in the Nama and Herero from Germany, and yeah, and I'm trying to bring two things together in that I had that okay, breathe. Okay, so I'm working in an ethnographic museum in the moment in Cologne, in an exhibition which is called Resist, 500 Years of Colonial Resistance. And we're working with a variety of people that are doing guides in this museum, in this exhibition. And a couple of the guides are working in the Zentrum in Cologne. So the former Gestapo terror space, just to put it that way, where the Nazis, the Gestapo, were really torturing and murdering people. And there's this this museum that commemorates and and educates people in that history, and also puts the archive in terms of a temporary permanent exhibition. And they were coming with a different approach into Resist, into this thinking of how can you mediate 500 years in a limited space, of course, of anti-colonial resistance, Widerstand. And they were coming with this approach that, because they were also working there, that in the working spaces of, I hope I'm making sense, in the Holocaust, the way that the pedagogical system in the Holocaust is working now is to actually be very critical with emotionalizing. So there's this stance of trying to not work with emotions, with emotionalization, and with politicized. I don't even know if they want to go that far as to say that the emotion would be politicized. Yeah, okay. And what I feel in my body the whole time is that that's very, very crucial. Yeah, and I just wanted to hear if you have any thoughts about that, because it stays with me in my mind, and I don't 100%. Yeah, okay, I'll leave it at there. But yeah,
it's a big question, and we have to have these dialogues for sure. I don't think we can talk about genocide without emotions. So, but we have to question where do we talk about genocide? With who do we talk about it? Who's talking? So I think I'm not done with this topic, but this time I chose a frame where it's about a loving relationship and with the question about your ancestors. So the framing was that the enkelin, the granddaughter, has Namibian roots and German roots. So we talked about what is that, what does this do to us? And how do we live with this? And how can you talk about this? So I took this frame because this was what I was questioning. How can we actually go on? How can a person who has both, who's black and white and who's German and Namibian? So, and then this is basically a framing. And also you can say, oh, Miriam, you did not show enough of the history. It was not what I wanted to do, because there's a lot of history already out there. But how do we go about it? What do we do with the knowledge of the history that's there? So now you're talking about a museum, right? So there are also different steps for me. One is, how do you talk about with this in schools? And I remember when I learned about the Holocaust in Germany, it's not okay that we're not talking about emotions, because we were shocked. We didn't know where to go with our emotions. Some kids vomited, some kids cried, and this is very typical German. Then you're not talking about the emotions, or you have to suck it up or not show any emotions. I don't believe that. So we should talk about that. We should learn about history and their facts, but actually the facts, they can hurt us. They can re-traumatize, because every person who learns about slavery, who learns about Holocaust, is traumatized by the moment we look at this and we realize this actually happened. So this is also what this person writes in this book, that we have to acknowledge the body and the emotions. And so now going back to the museum, 500 years. How many floors do they have? Like 20? Yeah. So I think there should be floors with facts. There should be floors, I mean, with all these ways to portray history, but definitely there should be a floor talking about trauma and talking about emotions, and maybe then give also guidance where to put those, because there are different ones. And yeah, that I have lots of thoughts, but I stop here.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you for your time and for your work and for sharing your work with us. Thank you very much. And Indra, thank you very much. Any last concluding remarks from you as well?
What could I say? I mean, I really enjoyed this conversation and I learned a lot from Miriam today, and I thank her enormously, and also, of course, the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center for offering us the platform.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Esther, for your questions as well and your comments. Thank you very much. So I would encourage people to refer to the chat, to look at some of the websites that we have that will enable you to have more information about the next webinars and other events that we host as a center and also as part of this collaboration. So from now, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. There will be a recording of this event, of this webinar, and it will be sent on our YouTube channel. So thank you. Good night, wherever you are. Good morning, good evening, and please stay safe. Thank you very much.